Drake Group is an insurance company. It sounds like a good thing. In fact, if you look online, you'll find there are some insurance companies called the Drake Group, or else we raise ducks or something. But no, we're actually an educational organization. And how did we get Drake Group? It came from our first meeting in 1999, which was at Drake University. And that kind of explains things to a lot of people. So we've been around since 1999. 2004 was an important date for the Drake Group. We met in Chicago, and because we were in Chicago, we developed our mission statement. And the mission statement was then, and continues to be, the mission of the Drake Group is to defend academic integrity in higher education, from the corrosive aspects of commercial college sports. So the feeling here is that all commercialism is not bad, but some kinds of commercialism have no place in a university. So that's the major mission of the Drake Group. At that same meeting in 2004, we just happened to be in Chicago, and the idea came up of maybe we should honor some people, some faculty or staff, who take a courageous stand to defend academic integrity. And we knew there were those kinds of people out there. Chicago, University of Chicago, Robert Maynard Hutchins. I don't know if you know this, but he was a former president of the university, or if you've ever heard of him, and he did away with football at the University of Chicago because of its incredible commercialism. He felt that commercialization was killing college sport. He was very much a fan of college sports, it really was, but he felt that the commercialism was really undercutting academic values. But that's only one little thing that happened in his life. More importantly, for why we have him as the name of our award, he's a real intellectual and a defender of academic integrity. He defended academic freedom. And this was during his administration. There was the Red Scare and the McCarthy hearings. He stood up for the faculty when they were speaking out and when they were being threatened with being fired. He also had a tremendous record for that time of supporting civil rights causes, black rights, African American rights, and he's one of the first to stand up for women's rights at that particular point in time. So without going into a detailed biography, by the way, we're in contact with his grandson, who works in Manhattan. And if you look at that picture of Robert Maynard Hutchins, and you see his son down there working on Wall Street, looks just like him. And I was in touch with him by email, and I talked to him on the phone, and he said he'd like to be even more informed and to keep him involved in what we're doing here. Someday maybe we'll get him to come out and give a talk about his grandfather. Let's see. What I'd like to do now is turn this thing over to Jason Lancher. Jason's been with the organization for 10 years, Jason?
Exactly, for 10 organizations since 2000.
Well, but I'll tell you, for the last 6 years, he was the president-elect. That's the way we do it. You're first you're the president-elect, then you're the president, and then you're the past president. So for the last 6 years, he's been doing this constantly. And he's been, with no exaggeration, he has been the heart and the soul of the Drake Group. Things could never have happened, these kinds of events and all the other things we have from the website, just a diligent worker. And I'd just like to have a round of applause for the tremendous
So we are here to honor the memory of Robert Maynard Hutchins. But before we do that, I also want to honor past recipients as well. And we can look through the history of this in terms of who has been awarded the RMH Award. Jan Kemp, the late Jan Kemp from the University of Georgia. Tiffany Main from LSU, who I still feel that when we actually heard her acceptance speech, which was sent via cassette tape back in the day. Frank Split from Northwestern. Linda Benzel-Myers from the University of Tennessee. Jim Gumlock from Auburn University. John Erickson from Drake University. Sally Healy from Binghamton University. Harry Edwards, longtime activist, I guess you could also put him at USC, the other USC, I guess, compared to where we're at now. Bill Dowling, who's at Rutgers. And last year, Mary Willingham, who was here in our presidency. Thank you for being here, Mary. Also, And Mary's also from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So today we get the first institutional two-time award recipient. RMH award. I'm not sure that Chapel Hill really wants to wear that badge, but they have it.
Next year, too, maybe it's 2 or 3 more years.
So let me give you a brief introduction to Dr. Jay Smith. He's a professor in the history department at North Carolina Chapel Hill. He is a specialist in early modern France, of which I have no knowledge whatsoever. He often uses the history of language to gain access to the processes of change. And I think that's important when we talk about change here. So as we talk about change, we are not here to honor Dr. Smith for his courageous stand for academic integrity at Chapel Hill. The academic scandal at Chapel Hill is to me, really the most egregious case of academic dishonesty in our universities. Fake classes, forged signatures of faculty members, grade changes without authorization, all occurring over a multi-year period. Dr. Smith has been a vocal critic of the events at Chapel Hill and seeks change in the academy. Change in terms of the balance of academics and athletics at our universities. Change in terms of the pressures for students, faculty, and administrators at universities. And this change in terms of the response to the demand of intercollegiate athletics. And he does this as the leader of the athletics reform group at Chapel Hill. As he says himself, we're talking about the culture of our university and how we should be dealing with the aftermath of a major, many-pronged scandal. We, the faculty, and the entire campus community need to have the opportunity to question our leaders, administrators, coaches, deans, faculty leaders, athletic directors, about actions that they have taken and about their vision for the university in the wake of our embarrassment. As his vocal critic of intercollegiate athletics and a continued agent for change in the intercollegiate athletics machine and within the academy, he has received severe criticism from faculty, staff, administrators, athletics, North Carolina fans, and community members. However, he has continued to engage in open dialogue about the issues in North Carolina and seek out the truth about the severe case of academic dishonesty by faculty and administrators. For this, and on behalf of the Drake Group, I am proud and honored to present the 2014 Robert Maynard Hutchins Award to Dr. Jay Smith.
First, I'd just like to dispense with a few quick thank yous. First, to my wife, who could not be here today, but who has just been incredibly patient and supportive over the past few years. She and Grey Goose have gotten me through so many difficult nights. So I thank her. Thanks to all of my faculty colleagues in the athletic reform group back at UNC, one of whom is here. I thank you all for your good sense, your perseverance, and your commitment to getting things right. And finally, thanks to the Drake Group. I cannot tell you how much it means to those of us who occasionally stick our necks out like this, to have a group of principled, esteemed, wise, experienced faculty stand up and say, we recognize that person as a person of integrity, and we stand with that person. It means so much. I wish you could give one of these every month, actually. So thank you. When I got off the phone, as I said, I'm gonna read this paper. When I got off the phone with Alan Sack after he had informed me that I was the recipient of this year's Robert Maynard Hutchins Award, my first sensation was one of humility. So many past winners of this award have been truly heroic figures, people whose risk-taking and fortitude I have personally found inspiring and intimidating. I've seen up close what Mary Willingham has endured, but virtually all previous Hutchins Award winners have suffered serious indignities at the hands of their respective institutions. I just do not rate. To date, I haven't been fired or demoted, at least so far. And I don't mean to make light of the suffering of my colleagues. So my first thought on talking to Alan was that I'm not worthy to be in such distinguished company. My second sensation was terror, because I realized I was going to have to give an acceptance speech, of course. I thought a lot about what I should say today. Should I talk about Hutchins, the athletics critic? He once said, as many of you know, that when I feel like exercising, I just lie down until the feeling goes away. Should I talk about the UNC case? That I decided I just couldn't face. Couldn't face the details of that one again. So instead, I've decided to talk about both very big issues and very small issues. The larger issues have to do with education and our duties as educators. And the smaller issues have to do with my own personal experience as a student, which is, I think, oddly relevant to the larger educational issues that big-time sport programs are just now beginning to confront, so if you'll indulge me. You see, I am a first-generation high school graduate. My father was a coal miner's son who grew up in a West Virginia company town, buying groceries with scrip, learning to sing gospel music at the community church, and sleeping in a company-owned house with 6 siblings and 2 hardworking parents. He escaped a life of deprivation only after joining the Army, which introduced him to the concept of 3 square meals a day and made it impossible for him to go back to his former life. After his term in the Army, he moved to Chicago and found good work in a plastics factory where he made his career. My mother was the daughter of a dirt-poor Alabama farmer who lost his farm to indebtedness just as my mother entered adolescence. Buckling under the stress, her father was unable to hold the family together. With her mother and sister, my mom moved to Chicago in 1941, and there she would eventually meet my dad. My parents were sharp people with a great deal of native intelligence, but their formal schooling ended about halfway through high school. As adults, they made a reasonably comfortable life for themselves, since it was still possible to do that in the immediate post-war era, even without diplomas or degrees. And they also somehow had the good sense and foresight to see to it that I grew up with the expectation that I would someday go to college. But my parents, God love them, had not the faintest idea how to get me ready for college. There were no SAT prep classes for me, I assure you. No fancy summer camps, no tuition fund. Every dollar of my education was paid for with student loans, every dollar. Nor was any thought ever given to my high school curriculum. I loaded up on music courses. Ironically, I quit French after my sophomore year. I would have to make up for a lot of, I made up for a lot of lost ground later. And I took only one AP course in high school, and that was mainly because friends were taking it. When it came to time to apply to college, it never occurred to my parents or to me that I might actually want to consider several schools. Never occurred to us. We just took it for granted that I'd go to the nearest state university campus. Going to the local university seemed a great step in itself. And indeed it was. The great genius of American higher education is that fine colleges and universities are scattered all across the nation in every state of the Union. Since the second half of the 19th century, forgive the history lesson, America has invested heavily in higher education, and the fruits of that investment can be seen everywhere. Bright, motivated children of the working class, or any class, really can get a great education almost anywhere if given the chance. So at 18, I went off to college. But like many students who come from environments where college is not the norm, where it is not part of the collective experience that gets shared around the dinner table, I arrived on campus, this was at Towson University in Maryland, and I quickly came to feel out of place and overwhelmed. My basic skills were okay, but I really had no idea how to study. I never even owned a backpack as an undergraduate. I never took a note while reading until I was in graduate school. I never owned a highlighter. In my first few semesters, I was thoroughly intimidated by my professors, to whom I rarely spoke. I was disengaged in class, never interested in the material. I floated along and went through the motions, and my performance reflected it. I got a D in physics. I pulled down C's in American Lit, Intro to Philosophy, Music Theory, and Freshman Composition. My grad students sometimes get a kick out of that last one, since I'm a bit of a perfectionist as a stylist, and I really beat them up over it too. But this was another time. My GPA at the end of my freshman year was a robust 2.2. You might say, and you would be right, that I had come to college unprepared, not ready to make the most of it. Had my sophomore year proceeded as my first year had, it's likely I would have dropped out of school. I could still envision life without a college education after all. My parents had done it, my older brother had done it, virtually all of my extended family had done it. I thought, maybe college isn't for me. But lucky for me, something clicked in my sophomore year. After abandoning music, I cast about looking for other subjects. I spent a semester thinking I might be a business major. Another bad grade in another less than gripping course showed me the error of my ways there. But in my third semester as a college student, still nursing my barely 2.0 GPA, I also took a course in European history, Towson's version of Western Civ. I took the course on a lark because my best friend was also taking it. We both needed a 2 o'clock class, and that's no lie. When the semester began, though, and I took my seat, I finally got excited for the first time by the content of a college class. I had had only American history in high school, so Europe was sufficiently exotic to make me feel like an interplanetary explorer that semester. Our professor spoke in a thick German accent, which probably helped. It was all so alien, so unfamiliar, and so unexpectedly stimulating to me. The Reformation made a particular impression. Consequently, after proudly collecting my B in that Western Civ, I took an advanced course on the history of the Reformation, and it was in this course, which I took at Northern Illinois University after having transferred from Towson, basically because my family had transferred, that I really turned a corner. In that Reformation course, I bonded with a professor, David Wagner, who was a delightfully quirky character, fully immersed in the world of ideas. He modeled a passion for intellectual work that was both idiosyncratic and alluring. His class was a hard one, the reading load fearsome. My writing was still far from refined, but I at least began to turn in earnest work that reflected a good deal of effort. I got a B on the first paper, and I began pushing myself to meet the professor's high standards. This course met on a Tuesday-Thursday schedule, and at one point, fairly early on in the semester, I had to miss 2 consecutive class meetings. This seems like a trivial anecdote to you, but believe me, it's not. At least it wasn't for me. I can't remember why I missed the Tuesday class, but a serious snowstorm derailed my commute on Thursday. I couldn't make it to campus. I never lived on campus as an undergraduate. My parents could not afford it. This was in the era before email, so I didn't even bother to notify the professor in advance about my absences. But when I finally reappeared in class, he said as I walked in the door, "Mr. Smith, we've missed you. I hope there will be no more absences." I was mortified by this. This was a small seminar course. Wagner had called me out in front of everyone. I stammered some sort of apology and sat red-faced through a discussion of the Augsburg Confession. But I did not miss another class. And after the embarrassment receded, I appreciated that a professor had noticed my existence. This is why I still remember this so well. He had detected in me some small bit of potential, and he wanted to make sure I was in it for the long haul. In the end, I got an A in Wagner's course, and he was a constant source of support for me in the years ahead. Next, I discovered early modern French history, which happens to be my own research specialty. My first exposure to French history came in a course taught by a brilliant teacher, one of the nation's leading experts on the French aristocracy. And this is another reminder, by the way, that there are unexpected intellectual riches waiting to be discovered by students on every campus in America. You do not have to be at Harvard. The professor for the early modern France course, William Bike, also pushed me. I put in more than my share of all-nighters writing papers for Bike. I'd like to think I set some sort of NIU record for this. And I can still remember the dread I felt when he returned our papers to us in class. I so wanted to impress him. In general, I think I did, but every critical word, every correction from Bike was like a dagger to the heart. I worked my tail off in that class and in other classes I took with him, but I never minded the work. Almost without noticing it, I had become absorbed in the learning process. I was so excited to gauge these past worlds that he so expertly brought to life that I only wanted more of it. By my junior year, I had found my groove. Although I was working 20 to 30 hours a week at a part-time job, and although the daily commute between DeKalb and Aurora often left me worn out, I was happy as a clam. I now talk to my professors with confidence. I enjoyed making progress with my writing. I began to develop my own critical perspectives on all sorts of things, and my grades were suddenly through the roof. My professors and I decided that I should consider graduate school, and they helped me strategize over my long-term plans. When I landed a prestigious fellowship to attend Michigan's highly regarded PhD program after taking a master's at NIU in the mid-'80s, my mentors in DeKalb were as proud as I was. By the time I arrived in Ann Arbor, I was on the path that would lead me to a rewarding and successful career as a historian at a public Ivy, no less. At 19, at the dawn of my sophomore year in college, I was aimless, unmotivated, unsophisticated, and drifting. The future looked dim and uncertain. Confronting the proverbial fork in the road, at that point I could easily have reverted to the family pattern, one that would have likely consigned me to a life of financial insecurity and would certainly have imposed more constricting cultural horizons on my adult experience. The opportunities lost had I made the wrong choice and dropped out would have limited, in turn, the possibilities open to my children. I know that I almost went down that road. Still today, I see others in my family, people very close to me, treading a very different, hard-scrabble path. And I continue to feel guilty about the distance between us because I know that at the age of 19, I was peering into a limited future. Yet 2 years later, at the age of 21, I was an entirely different person. How did this happen? The sheer abundance of intellectual victuals at American universities and my freedom to sample from the menu, to explore, to make my own choices, helps to explain how I came to have the life I have today. But far more important to the outcome of my story is the kind of help I received along the way. I needed to be brought along. I needed to be challenged. More than once, I needed to be reassured that I could do it. One professor at NIU, Harvey Smith, counseled me a lot about grad school. And I remember him saying to me at one point, "Jay, why do you keep asking whether this is really possible?" But I needed to hear him say it over and over again. I needed patient but demanding instruction. I needed sophisticated people to address my various deficiencies, telling me how certain words were really supposed to be pronounced, for example. I needed experts from academic world, which was so not my world, to show that they believed in me. And at NIU and then later at Michigan, I got more high-level dedicated teaching than a person has a right to expect. Sure, I had found the subject, European history, that pointed me in a new direction. But an array of wonderful teachers reached down, allowed me to latch on, and they pulled me up toward the light. They invited me to reach for their standards, and they showed me how to get there. And they changed me. To paraphrase Robert Maynard Hutchins, they unsettled my mind, they inflamed my intellect. That was Hutchins' definition of a real education. And that brings me to the moral of this tale. Higher education has the capacity to transform lives. For me, college was not the place to make up my mind whether to pursue medicine or law or the family business. It wasn't simply the place to acquire a little cultural capital to facilitate professional ambitions. College was certainly not, in my case, the place to learn the techniques of wealth management. Not for me. No, college meant access to a different kind of life, an enriched life, a life of ever-expanding horizons. My experience as an unprepared, teetering undergraduate who finally made good, who had his life changed by an inflamed intellect, has deeply informed my activism over the past few years. Athletes, as everyone in this room knows, are too often denied access to the transformative experience of a genuine university education. And it's not just the underprepared athletes we're talking about, though they're the ones for whom I feel a special affinity. A great many college athletes, particularly in the revenue or profit sports where hyper-professionalization has overtaken the enterprise, are subjected to a form of bondage that restricts their range of motion and limits their opportunities. Harnessed to the disciplinary regimes of their coaches and caught in the gears of the eligibility machine constructed at their institutions, they are forced to subordinate their academic needs and interests to the needs of their sport. I don't want to ruffle any feathers with this next big generalization, but I think it needs to be acknowledged. Athletes are advised by people who generally are not academics and who therefore do not have the experience or the instinct to detect the warning signs of substandard pedagogy or degraded classroom expectations. Indeed, many have learned to be grateful for signs of low expectations because of the eligibility demands that they and their charges must keep foremost in mind. Too many athletes are funneled to the same fluff classes, the same majors, and the same friendly faculty who perversely protect them from the academic grind. They're led through a shadow version of the true university curriculum that their non-athlete classmates explore freely and through trial and error, as I once did. The shadow is an apt metaphor. Like the cave dwellers from Plato's famous allegory, large numbers of recruited scholarship athletes in football and basketball have been denied access to the light. Strapped into place by relentless scheduling demands and an intense pressure to perform physically at the highest level, and also sometimes dealing with learning deficits that go largely unaddressed, they see only the dancing shadows of their puppeteers on the wall of the cave where they are chained. Controlled by their handlers and kept always on task, they live in a segregated educational space where they are denied a glimpse of the real mind-stretching possibilities of intellectual exploration, of the uniquely elevating experience that is higher education in America. I've become convinced that it is up to us, the educators, the people who are supposed to be in charge at universities, to liberate athletes from their peculiar form of bondage, to lead them out of that darkened cave and into the sunlight. They need our help. They need our expertise. They need our dedication to their best long-term interests. We need to lend them a hand, sometimes reaching pretty far down, so that they can gain an intellectual perch from which to launch their own voyages of exploration. And we need to push them. That is our duty. We are educators. We don't process people through bureaucratic hurdles, and we don't print diplomas. We transform lives. To carry out this mission, we're going to have to make a concerted effort to free up athletes' time to sharply reduce their insane travel and practice schedules. Spring football's abolished, I say. We're going to have to work with coaching staffs and ADs to rearrange their priorities. The word student comes before athlete in that famous compound term. And if they are students, they're ours. They're not the property of the athletic department. We're going to have to ensure that scholarship athletes in football and basketball and in all sports have access to the same opportunities that non-athletes take for granted. Study abroad, internships, research opportunities, late afternoon classes, for crying out loud. We have to give some the remedial support they need. If we admit them, we take care of them. We're going to have to seize control of the academic advising apparatus. No more courses or majors should be selected by people whose first responsibility is NCAA compliance. Here's what I'd like to tell the NCAA. You comply with us. We faculty will determine what a real education consists of and what eligibility means. When the faculty in this country make up their minds actually to educate everyone who gains admission to their respective institutions, and to brook no interference from people consumed by other priorities, the nonsense will stop. We, the guarantors of the educational credentialing process, have the power to impose order on this cockamamie system. We can ensure that athletes, too, may have the chance to pursue a PhD in French history. Or, since there are a few jobs in that field, to become teachers, artists, doctors, archaeologists, nurses, inventors, musicians, heck, even lawyers. And while we go about organizing the coming coup, principled and visible faculty reform groups should be providing safe havens and vocal campus support for whistleblowers all across the country. Real reform, if it is ever going to happen, will happen because of the determined action of fed-up faculty. So here's my final word. I would like to think that my own experience as a most unlikely academic success story can remind all of us that it's not our job to print diplomas. It is our job to transform lives through higher learning. And for the sake of the athletes, we need to rededicate ourselves to that job. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jay, for reminding all of us of the incredible transformative potential of education. And I think back when I played football at Notre Dame, I had the time. What I was able to do was take a God-given gift that I had as an athlete and to leverage that into a really great education. And I look back now after 40 years, I feel blessed to have that privilege. And I constantly ask myself, why don't today's athletes have that same kind of a privilege? Why don't they have the time I had to study at Notre Dame? Why do they play 13 games while we played 10 games? You know, why did I not have to get up in the morning at 5:30 in the morning and lift weights and work all day long and that kind of stuff? It didn't bother me till the afternoon. Why has it changed, and why can't it go back to be something more like that? And your talk was just absolutely incredible. And any faculty or others who deal with students have to be touched by that. So thank you very much. Thank all of you for coming to this today, and enjoy the rest of this conference.